So in my last video where I talked about the worst thing in every Mario game, go watch that if you haven't already, I mentioned how I don't really like the hub world in Mario Galaxy 2, which it turns out a lot of people disagreed with. But one of the comments on that section reminded me of something I actually really like about that hub that I completely forgot about. As you progress through the different worlds in Galaxy 2, the skybox in the hub will change to match whichever world you're in, and some of the ones near the end feel truly epic on a much larger scale than Mario games can usually achieve. And so originally this video was just going to be kind of appreciating the skyboxes in this game, because it's not just this hub. Throughout the game you'll encounter skyboxes that are truly just awe-inspiring in a way that not many other games have accomplished. But in my research I found out that the YouTuber Aaron C. Show already made that video, as well as one for the first game. So I ended up giving up on that idea. However, there is something that video doesn't actually touch on, which is an aspect of all of my favorite skyboxes in Galaxy 2. Where the hell is this? So yes, technically none of Mario Galaxy 2's skyboxes make sense, but neither does anything else in this game. In Yoshistar Galaxy, you're surrounded by these beautiful layered clouds, so I guess there's an entire atmosphere around these 5 tiny floating islands. Both Galaxy games abuse video game logic so much that it doesn't really make sense to analyze them from a physics perspective. And there are of course many galaxies that are just fully abstract, like the sub-areas in Mario Sunshine. But that's not really the point I'm trying to make here. For that, let's go back to where I was hanging out at the start of the video. This is Shiverburn Galaxy. It's a somewhat forgettable level late into the game that works as kind of a sequel to Freeze Flame Galaxy from the first game, although that one was definitely much more interesting. However, this galaxy is actually quite notable in one way. It's one of the few levels in any game, I guess, that's actually known for its skybox. The first thing that most people notice here are of course these little freaks staring at you throughout the level, who you can actually see in-game using the first-person camera feature, but for me these alien guys are just one extra small detail that adds to the already incredible atmosphere of this galaxy. While playing through Galaxy 1, I initially assumed that these planets and platforms and such were meant to be orbiting some object, or at least flying through space one way or another. But in galaxies like Shiverburn, that's clearly impossible. We are literally below what appears to be the ground level of this planet, and so the only apparent options are that this is either floating randomly in this spot, or that we are actually flying through this canyon, kind of orbiting below the surface of the planet. Which, and I hope this isn't controversial to say, is cool as fuck. But it's not really that specific concept which makes this galaxy cool to me, it's more just the scale of everything. The sheer width of this canyon far exceeds anything else in this game, well except the other skyboxes of course. And it's impossible to imagine the land surrounding the top of this crevice as anything but a vast, barren expanse. On top of that, something about the stormy looking sky and the lava filling the bottom of the canyon makes this scene feel very dramatic, almost like this is some sort of rift opened up to the very core of this planet. Speaking of dramatic, this is Hightail Falls Galaxy. For whatever reason, this is the first galaxy that comes to mind when I think of Mario Galaxy 2. I guess it just perfectly encapsulates this game's vibe of just straight up fun, high energy obstacle courses, though of course it does often stray from that format. The most eye-catching thing here are the titular waterfalls, which fully surround the play area. Now, I may be biased here because I love waterfalls. There's just something about them that somehow feels both overwhelming and calming at the same time. But this galaxy really makes you feel like you're within the chaos of a waterfall, and that's all thanks to the skybox. The level itself contains no cascading elements. Actually, now that I think about it, the walls you run up with Yoshi are kind of like the cliche of running on a waterfall, like that one Mario Kart track. I wonder if they originally were going to be waterfalls, but it was too hard to see while in them or something, so they decided to keep the waterfall theme in the level by putting it in the skybox. Really makes you think, huh? But anyways, I'm bringing up this galaxy because there's not really anything else like it in the game. It just feels so real in a way that other skyboxes don't. It just straight up looks like some natural wonder that you'd find somewhere on Earth. There's just nothing spacey or alien feeling about it, which is something it shares with my favorite skybox in Galaxy 2. No, that is not a segue into the next galaxy. I'm actually going to save that one for the end of the video. In fact, I want you right now to try and think of which skybox I'm talking about. It's fine if you can't, I'm just curious if other people notice and remember the skyboxes in this game in the way that I do. But anyways, yeah, now on to the next galaxy. Alright, so I don't have much to talk about with this one, but this is Slipsand Galaxy. Now obviously this galaxy is like in space. The vibe of this skybox doesn't really feel different than any other galaxy with a dark sky. But I just like how because this is like a digging based galaxy, they actually managed to make it feel somewhat underground, with the huge planet surrounding you and the holes to the surface making you feel like you're in the middle of a mine or quarry or something. And by the way, for some reason I thought this galaxy used a remix of the Mario 1 Underground theme for its music, but no, it's got this banger industrial sounding track, and here's a tip, go listen to it at 0.75 times speed on YouTube, that's where it's at. Next I have another iconic skybox from Galaxy 2. At least I think it is. This is the only one of these I remember noticing when I was a little kid watching my mom or my brothers play this game, but maybe that's just me. For whatever reason, this is another one of those galaxies that I first think of when this game comes up. You know, maybe it is actually the skyboxes that make these memorable. It is the common denominator here. Or maybe it's Squizzard. But anyways, here in Slipsand Galaxy, the planets are surrounded by these ominous towers which stretch high up into this dramatic cloudy sky. These buildings feel so out of place in this game, like there's something out of a post-apocalyptic fantasy world. And I know all of these skyboxes are much bigger than the player, that's just the way skyboxes work. They're arguably kind of infinitely bigger than the player. But ignoring that, these towers still stand out as uniquely gigantic. They have a certain monumentality to them that's part of some of my favorite fictional environments. This background footage, by the way, is from the game Chants of Sennar. It's one of my favorite indie games, largely because it features a lot of this type of architecture that feels way too big to be used by humans. This could imply that these structures are made by or for some other species, or they could be a remnant of societal decadence, leaders who care more about grandeur and spectacle than providing for their people, kind of like we've seen in real life. But that's getting a bit too serious. I want to focus more on the visual aspect of these skyboxes rather than their lore implications. I already mentioned the monumentality of these structures, but I really want to hammer that point home. I think it was such a good decision to conceal the base of these towers with a layer of clouds. It makes the area below feel very mysterious and implies there is even more to the buildings below the clouds, and that we're just seeing like the tips of them. It also makes you wonder what else could be on the surface below, hidden from view. Now, Slipsand isn't the only galaxy that uses this skybox, or at least a version of this skybox. Clockwork Ruins Galaxy uses this light sky variant, which for some reason I never realized. Like, I thought this was just a completely different one. But I mean, it works. Everything I said about this skybox in the previous galaxy applies completely differently to this one. It successfully completes the ancient ruins vibe that I assumed they were going for, and it feels like the ruins that you're platforming on in this level could have fallen off one of these towers and drifted over here. And I do still think the clouds obscuring the ground work well here, while in Slipsand Galaxy it felt like the towers were built in some vast desert far below. In Clockwork Ruins, it feels more like they're in the middle of a mountain range, or maybe even on a huge ocean, like that one tower in the Wind Waker. Alright, here's a cool one. This is Bowser's Galaxy Generator. It is the final level in the game, base game at least, and for that title it definitely has a suitable skybox. This is notable as the only skybox in the game that is just straight up inside a building. It features this empty hallway that seems to stretch off forever into darkness, and not just farther up the carpeted path, these areas behind the tall pillars are also obscured, and the hallway feels way too wide for one with this low of a ceiling. It kinda reminds me of the surprisingly unsettling skybox of Toy Time Galaxy from the first game, one of the few ones there that match the vibe of its sequel. Now, this skybox is at the point where it's so unrealistic, it almost feels fully abstract, like a few galaxies that I decided not to show in this video. But if you do interpret this skybox as a literal place, then it raises a lot of questions about why and how this building is so big. I mean, there's literally fog forming above the floor, this room is so huge. My personal headcanon is that Bowser can get really big in this game, so he made his castle or whatever huge so he can be big in it and walk around. I don't know. But either way, the true scale of this room being ambiguous due to the darkness adds a lot to the atmosphere here. It almost feels ominous, like Bowser is stomping around in the darkness and watching you as you play through the level, just waiting to finally face off with you at the end. Okay, this is the skybox I was hyping up earlier in the video. It is insanely atmospheric and isn't really comparable to anything else in this game. I am of course talking about the iconic level, Flash Black Galaxy. Is that what it's called? Okay, so maybe they put their best skybox on a pretty forgettable galaxy, but that shouldn't say anything about the quality of this skybox. I mean, I did just say it's one of the best in the game. I noticed this one when I was playing through this game for the first time as not a small child a few years ago, and it was honestly a very memorable moment. I remember going into the first person mode and just looking at the scenery for minutes, just kind of mesmerized at how this could appear in a Mario game, and one set in space at that. The galaxy is surrounded by these tall pine trees that are fully silhouetted against a dark green sky. It really makes you feel like you're lost in the middle of a vast forest, which I guess fits the spooky dark vibe of this level. It also gives somewhat of a sense of uneasiness, like there's something lurking out there, but maybe I've just been playing too much Voices of the Void. I also really like how below the trees there's more vegetation, which you'd expect in a forest, but the scale of it is incredibly small. Like these are literally individual strands of grass. It makes you feel like you're on a human level, or maybe even smaller, which is something you don't usually get in a game like this. One interesting detail, however, that stops this from feeling like this house structure is actually in the middle of the woods, is how the plants of the forest seem to abruptly end in a large circle around the playable area, and the space below is just black, empty abyss. Now obviously this is probably just a limitation created from this being a skybox and the developers wanting to keep every level as floating planets as opposed to structures or landmasses on a planet, but here it definitely adds to the vibe. Like this skybox almost starts to make sense as a real place, but this one touch stops it from getting all the way there. It also feels kind of alien? Okay, oh no. I've definitely been playing too much Voices of the Void. But yeah, this skybox is pretty cool. It definitely adds a lot more to this level than most skyboxes. Oh, and did I forget to mention the giant unidentifiable tower shrouded in darkness? This thing is such a strange decision that I kinda love it. I don't know if I've ever seen a single other skybox in a game like this that has a focal point. And it's not hidden either. One of the stars in this galaxy is literally framed by this tower. But besides its mere existence, I also find it weird how I can't seem to identify what this tower is actually meant to be. Like my first thought was some kind of watchtower, which you would normally see in a forest like this, but at least to me I can't seem to make out the right shapes for it to be one of those. And besides an observation tower, I honestly can't think of any buildings this tall in the middle of the forest. But yeah, Flash Black Galaxy has become one of my favorite levels in the entire game, despite not really being that fun, kind of like the galaxy directly after it, but I'll save that for a future video. Now, the reason I made this video about Galaxy 2 and not the first game is not because Galaxy 1 features no skyboxes with this sort of vibe. If you look through Galaxy 1, you will find a few notable skyboxes and many just straight up beautiful ones, but there just aren't that many that feel different from what you'd expect from skyboxes in a Mario game. However, to end off, I do want to show my favorite skybox from the first Mario Galaxy, that I believe stands toe-to-toe with Galaxy 2's best skyboxes. Welcome to Bowser's Star Reactor. So this skybox is actually also featured in a level in Galaxy 2, and I get why. I'd imagine it'd be pretty hard to make a better skybox to evoke this specific vibe. I don't know about you, but the first thing this skybox reminded me of was the game Iron Lung. It places you on a moon covered in a similar red liquid, except in that case, it's literally blood, which makes you wonder what this liquid is supposed to be. I don't want to dwell too much on this level since it is from a different game that is in the title of the video, but if you want me to talk about some of the other weird skyboxes in Galaxy 1, maybe I can make a super short video about that sometime. So yeah, thanks for listening to me ramble about this, and feel free to tell me what I should ramble about next. The background footage, by the way, is from the website noclip.website. I'll link in the description if you want to try it out. But anyways, bye.